Morning all. I thought it would be nice to put some emphasis on the games from the Blitz Championship, which had video footage already, to see the actual players, etc., and how they reacted to certain moves. And in that respect, another video footage game is Fabiano Caruana, one of the very strong junior players in the event, versus Magnus Carlsen. So this kicked off with E4. And it's interesting, if you want a system against a Ruy Lopez exchange variation, a dynamic kind of gambit system. Let's take Magnus's perspective, Black's perspective. So he protects the pawn, expecting standard Ruy Lopez, but then we get the slightly more offbeat exchange variation, which of course Lasker used to defeat Capablanca. Okay, so D takes C6, and now after castles, here is the gambit. Instead of protecting E5, which I guess most of us would do, you know, say a move like Bishop D6, Magnus actually just plays Knight E7. This does seem very interesting. Okay, so after Knight takes E5, it is actually a gambit because White's holding on to the pawn now. After Queen D4, if we look at these next moves, so Queen H5 protects the knight and threatens mate in 1. No, not mate in 1, but threatens Queen takes F7, as an escape square at the moment. So Black is a pawn down, but I think it's very nice compensation. And I've checked out this line on chessgames.com, and statistically it seems to be favouring Black, for Black winning out of this variation in this particular continuation. So G6, dual purpose move, not just protect F7, but also the bishop can now be fianchettoed. Attacks E5, the knight must retreat now. And now, an interesting early pawn move. Okay, the pawn move is F5, which has been played a lot before, believe it or not. Okay, so F5, and so this E4 pawn is under fire. It doesn't really want to take, I think, because then I think bishop takes, but then I'm looking at rook E1. So let's just quickly engine check this game for the obvious idea of E takes F5, trying to expose this black king. If we really want to try playing this variation as Black, I think we need to be prepared for E takes F5. E takes F5. Rivka likes this. Bishop F5, slightly better for Black. So say rook E1, what happens here? Okay, there's the resource bishop F6. Okay, so the queen's driven back, and now you can just castle queenside. So that's how to sort out that issue. Okay, if we do want to play this line, so F5, E5, which is the more commonly played move. Now Magnus plays, now in chessgames.com there's Queen G4 immediately, but Magnus inserts C5, which, you know, this C4 threat has to be dealt with because this knight's, you know, protecting E5, etc. So B3, also the bishop can now be fianchettoed. Now you may wonder about this rook being in pre here. Okay, I think the queen's just getting trapped after knight C3. It's just a trap with an execution move, next move, bishop B2, because the knight's actually protecting B2. Okay, so that rook can't be taken, I think, for that reason. So Queen G4. Okay, so this was the stand move instead of C5, but Queen G4, and from here on, it seems, you know, Magnus, okay, he's played this kind of gambit, yeah, he's a pawn down here after Queen takes, which is, in chess games, it's F4 after the immediate Queen G5. There isn't this position. This position is slightly different now. So Black is a pawn down, but look at the pieces, and the point is, Black's going to castle queenside and exert pressure naturally on the D file on this knight. So this looks like a very nice position. So knight takes C5 is actually winning yet another pawn. Okay, so White is now 2 pawns up. Yes, it's a double pawn gambit, in fact. So B6, knight D3. Anyway, it was only a double pawn, nothing to worry about. Still, Black can get on with this plan now, you know, of casting queenside and this D-file pressure. Okay, he's 2 pawns down, but, you know, lots of compensation now. So bishop D3, and although he's 2 pawns down, he takes the opportunity to shatter white's pawn structure, then castles. And he's, you know, that pawn's under fire. You know, if d4, I think there's knight c6 winning the pawn back. So actually that was only a temporary second pawn sack. So knight a3, rook takes d3. Magnus is only a pawn down. Excellent position to have with the black pieces. And also, you know, he's got pressure on d2, of course. And this knight, you know, if it did move to c4, then maybe just b5 and rook d2. As it went, you know, rook ac1, and it seems black's really, you know, much clearly better now after b5, to me at least, because this knight's really like restricted from coming to c4 now. So knight c2, rook takes d2. So Magnus is getting his other pawn back. So all of a sudden now, it's equal on pawns. Okay. So it was only a temporary double pawn gambit. So bishop c3, rook e2. But black has active, you know, pieces. You know, the bishop's not too bad, just attacking that with that, and the other rook can come, maybe join the other rook, 7th rank. Good stuff. Knight d4. So actually Magnus now goes, after all that, a pawn up. After rook takes a2. White has a bit of compensation though, knight e6. So he's got some menacing threats developing here on c7 and g7. So rook g8, humbly just protecting that bishop. Now rook a1. So is the black king side under fire? Magnus just takes, and then king b7, not minding this knight c5 check. Pardon me. So the king attacks the rook. That's the way of defending that pawn. Okay. Now here, you may wonder about knight takes a6, like I am at the moment, because rook a8, there's knight b4 check. So what would happen actually if knight takes a6? I think we need to engine check this position. What's going on here? Is it knight? I wonder if it's just knight d5. Yeah, knight d5 is given as a strong move. Just if knight b4, then take on e5. Knight d5, tiny bit, minus 0.001 or not even, just about equal this position. Okay, so Caruana's managed to somehow get some nice counterplay going from a position which was slightly, you know, passive. So king c6, he could have, you know, taken on a6, but so b4. Okay, so he's not gaining that pawn now. He's just a pawn down, but with a dominating position still. And he's now going to take the pawn. After rook a8, he takes the pawn. But his pieces seem a bit loose, and this e5 pawn seems a bit loose. And actually doesn't last too many moves from this position. So knight d5, and now the b pawn is also under fire. Bishop f8. So maybe this b4 plan wasn't the greatest. e6, and now Magnus just snaps up that b pawn. So he's really a pawn up, and this looks kind of serious actually now. So knight b8 check. King comes to d5, forking e6 and c5. Knight d7, hitting that bishop. But the bishop just comfortably goes down to d6. And next move, this pawn's going to drop as well. So here, Caruana's position is getting kind of desperate. After bishop c5, Magnus avoids playing bishop c5. There's knight takes c5, and if it takes, then he's e7. He just simply snaps e6. So he's just 2 pawns up, and here Fabiano resigned. So I just thought this was an interesting gambit system, which we may consider against the Ruy Lopez exchange variation. Just starting with this knight e7 move. Forget about protecting e5. Then this queen d4, inviting queen h5. So you do something about the mate, and you finish to your bishop. And then you play this move f5, which, although it seems potentially a bit strange, because e takes bishop f5, there's rook e1, there's bishop f6, and then you can get on with castling. So e5 is the more commonly played move here. And now Queen G4 is the chess game's move, but Magnus inserted C5, which seems to lead to a double pawn gambit, really, because mixing C5 with Queen G4 is leaving the C5 pawn en prie. So, you know, the C5 is now going to be en prie after Queen G4. So that's probably why White didn't play F4, because he's thinking, you know, why can't I just take the queen and take this pawn? This is not right, surely. Maybe I'm supposing here. So it seems to be, is this a theoretical innovation, a double pawn sack from a single pawn sack line? So 2 pawns down, but there seems to be a lot of compensation, obviously, on the d file, if that's going to castle queenside, and shatter White's pawn structure. He's already gaining 1 pawn back. So the interesting thing here is you know, White's willing to try and gambit himself some pawns now. So he doesn't mind losing d2, because he's accelerating, getting his pieces into very good positions now. So the knight's getting aggressive, doesn't mind losing a2 either. But maybe he just went one step too far. One little blunder here. Maybe he could have gone for knight takes a6. The knight a6 line, knight d5. In theory, this b4 turned out to be terrible because it was easy to attack with this knight and bishop, this poor pawn on b4. So rook a8 first. So this path of simplification means, well, Black's king is also very aggressive, you know, onto White's pawns potentially as well. So knight d5, hitting these loose kind of pieces and pawns, and bishop f8, easy coordination of the black pieces. e6, both these pawns are highly vulnerable here. So pawn up, and there's going to be 2 pawns up, and that's it. Fabiano resigns. So I hope you enjoyed that, and you might consider this variation in your long games even. I think I might, if I ever play e5. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.